Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be explaining anxiety in a way that people who don't have anxiety can understand. Before I get going, please make sure you like, subscribe and hit that little notification bell. Anxiety can be described as a persistent feeling of fear, worry and nervousness. Many people feel anxious at times, especially when there are big events going on or big changes in our lives, and this is normal. It's a natural human response when we are stressed. If these feelings continue for longer than normal, over a range of days, weeks, even years in some cases, then you may want to consider an anxiety disorder. In the UK, a little over 1 in 10 people are suffering with an anxiety disorder at any one time. That's 8 million people. Anxiety varies from day to day and from person to person. The symptoms of anxiety that you may have might be completely different to those of your best friend, and that's completely normal. Because of this, you can't expect everyone to know what's going on inside your head at all times. It's important that those with anxiety have someone close to them that they can tell their feelings, so that they don't keep them inside them and let them bubble up. If you're here because someone you love has anxiety, the first thing you've probably done is Google it and read the NHS website about what anxiety is, and that's great, well done for getting that far. But remember that everyone will experience anxiety differently, and looking at a list of things that this person may or may not respond to might not be helpful. So make sure you take the things you learn from reading up about anxiety and talk to the person about them and see which ones relate to them, and together you can discuss how you're going to cope moving forwards. Because I didn't want to just give you anxiety from my point of view, I asked my Instagram followers if they could describe how anxiety feels for them, and I got some amazing responses which I will be sharing with you throughout this video. It's important to remember that anxiety can make you feel really alienated and alone, but there are so many of us around the world who can join together and unite with this feeling of anxiety. And actually, knowing that you're not the only one suffering can make you feel so much better. It's such a comfort to know that you're not on your own and that there are other people out there who can help. I think the most important thing to say to people who don't suffer with anxiety is that anxiety actually becomes our normal. Because we've lived with it for such a long time, the small changes that we have to make to our life to cope with it add up, and eventually these little things become huge things and our lives can be completely different to what other people perceive as normal. We spend so much time living with anxiety that we might forget what life was like before it. If you're involved in a conversation between someone who suffers from anxiety and someone who doesn't, please remember to be able to look at it from both sides. You're both going to have completely different views of the world, and that's okay. The first step to being able to understand anxiety is being able to put differences beside you and look at the facts. The fact is, one person sees the world one way and one person sees the world the other. How can we, together, get to the end? Anxiety presents itself in lots of different ways in everybody. It has mental and physical symptoms, which differ from person to person. Let's start with the mental because they're the most difficult to imagine. Inside the brain of an anxious person is a very stressful and chaotic place. We are always switched on and find it very difficult to relax. Someone described it to me as being on an infinite loop, being constantly on edge, suffering with overwhelming and uncomfortable thoughts. Having so many thoughts in our head at once can make us really indecisive, which can be very irritating for those who don't have anxiety. Please remember that we're not being awkward on purpose. There is a lot going inside our heads, and these little decisions, which might seem little to you, are huge for us. Just a side note here, saying just don't overthink it really doesn't help us, because that just gives us another thing to overthink. Instead, why not try sitting back and asking how you can help make a decision better, rather than adding more and more questions and decisions into the mix. All these negative thoughts can make us feel really claustrophobic. Someone on Instagram said it's like swimming and trying not to drown, and that's completely true. We are just paddling and trying to keep our heads above the water. A lot of the time we're stuck in our own heads, and this can be a very uncomfortable and intrusive place to be. There's a little voice inside our head that's constantly worrying, constantly wondering what bad things can happen, and it's always on talking to us, and we can't get away from that. Anxiety creates a constant war inside our heads, which can be incredibly frustrating. Simple tasks like going to the shop or even getting out of bed can become really difficult because we are just so tired from all the hard work that we have to put in to function normally. We're not being lazy, we're just struggling. It's completely different. Those with anxiety are their own worst self-critics. The smallest of things can create the biggest of reactions for us. We're very aware that our behaviour can be annoying. We know this because it irritates us too. You're not the only one. Because of this, we tend to sink into our shells and become very closed people. We don't like going out to parties, we don't like being around friends because we're worried about what they might be thinking of us, because we're scared to open up, we're scared to talk, in case someone's noticed how differently we're behaving. Unfortunately, the more time we spend alone, the more anxious we become, and it just becomes this endless loop. Anxiety is really time consuming. There's a lot of effort required just to function normally. I want to make it clear that those with anxiety can't simply just switch off that anxious button and pretend it's not there. It doesn't work like that. In the same way that being nervous, you can't just turn that off. If you're about to go to a big event and you're nervous, you can't just say, right, that's it, I'm not nervous anymore, and carry on. There will still be that feeling inside you, and it's the same for anxiety. Another thing to say about anxiety is that we're not just making it up for attention. If we wanted attention, there's lots of other things we could do rather than making ourselves mentally ill. Like I said before, there are physical symptoms of anxiety as well. Anxiety makes us tense up, it makes us clench our muscles, and doing this all day can be really tiring. It can be hard for us to relax or even remember what it's like to be relaxed. Those with anxiety will often have their shoulders hunched up, their fists clenched, and that's because of the fight or flight response. We're constantly ready to go into action. Some people with anxiety may suffer with some unexplained health problems, such as migraines, muscle weakness, tummy problems, and these can all actually be explained by anxiety. It's not always the first place you'd go to look for answers for these conditions, but it is possible. So here's the one thing I really want you to take away from today's video. Sometimes it's rational, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we don't know what's going on. Sometimes we do. It's different every day. Whatever the case, we're all human and we all deserve to be treated exactly the same. We all deserve to have the same amount of respect. Please, if you're watching this to try and help someone with anxiety, sit down and talk with them. Let them take their time, let them get their thoughts together, and work out a plan of how you can help them best. Sometimes they might not want constant help. Sometimes just knowing that someone's there for them, that can help them on the bad days, is enough to help them through. Remember, anxiety isn't a character flaw. Anxiety is a mental illness. It's serious, and just like every other physical illness, symptoms can get better if we treat it well. Thank you for watching my video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and head to @mindinthegap on Instagram or the website for more. Bye!